Critical shortages of building and construction materials, including cement, steel, bricks and timber, are suffocating the sector's recovery from the COVID-19 lockdown and diminishing its impact on the economy. Experts say if this continues for an extended period of time, it has the potential to derail government's planned massive infrastructure investment plan to stimulate the country's economy post-COVID-19. Well, joining us now to discuss the prospects and challenges faced by the sector is Chief Economist of the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa, Chifi Mhango. A very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, just talk to us about how big this shortage is of a construction material in the sector at this point in time.
The indications we're getting is that there is some slight shortages in cement, bricks, as well as steel in the segment. But that has actually been caused mostly due to capacity issues in most of the plants. Most of the plants are still operating below capacity. For instance, if you look in the manufacturing sector alone in total, you are talking about close to 73% capacity utilization. While if you go into the metal industry sector, you're talking about 64% capacity utilization. So obviously with the issues of lockdown, that is something that is normal in this situation because we are still in the lockdown phase.
Well, considering that we have moved down to level 1 of the lockdown, is there no way that capacity could be improved in some of these manufacturing plants to increase the supply of these materials?
Most definitely. I think those are operational matters. You need to understand one thing, that is we had a movement towards a high level of demand in the sector. So for instance, construction material was actually around 1 billion in terms of sales, if you look at the figures. But between April to August, you are looking at a massive demand levels of, on average, of about 10 billion. And that was happening at the time when most of the industries were not even operating. But what you must understand is to manufacture most of the products, it's a process that takes maybe like almost close to 3 months in terms of manufacturing them. So with that kind of backlog, most of these companies are actually in that kind of phase where they have to revive their operational levels, but they are still operating under the guise of lockdown measures, which is to say you can't have the same number of people in a plant. So all those challenges are actually coming up in terms of what the stock levels are and also not able to meet the demand levels in the market. The construction sector is actually on the peak slightly. And then coming with the government projects that are coming through, there could be a process of how best you can manage that from the tender process point of view. You cannot go to tender on government projects if you cannot guarantee supply.
Well, take us through some of those ramifications. You're mentioning some of the government projects that have been outlined, new infrastructure, obviously with the intention of stimulating the economy. What are the ramifications of such shortages coming from the supply side of construction?
I think that is quite a concern at this stage. If you look historically, for instance, during the time of 2003 to 2010, we had massive projects from government, mainly to support the 2010 World Cup project. Stadiums were being built. We had a lot of coal train stations being built. During that time, the construction sector was growing on a range of between 10 and 25%. And also the economy was also growing quite on a steady level between 3 and 5%. So you can clearly see the stimulative impact of the construction sector towards other sectors of the economy. You cannot construct without cement, you cannot construct without steel. So as long as you have got a push towards construction projects, you get that kind of response in the market, in the economy in terms of growth patterns. So it is a concern if we cannot be able to supply the construction sector, especially at a time when we've got massive challenges of unemployment in the economy and also inequalities in the economy, but at the same time looking at a negative growth which has been happening for the last quarters. So to push the economy, we need the construction sector boom to stimulate other sectors of the economy. At this stage, it's a concern, but there should be a way in which there can be engagement at project level with government and the suppliers of the particular products. Steel is the biggest concern in this regard, and cement is also the biggest concern in this regard.
And in terms of some of the cash flow that these construction companies that may have been awarded tenders are now facing, will they be able to continue their projects at least until December when the close of most companies is expected?
Well, at this stage, I think all I can say, we are almost halfway through November. Most of the companies that supply into the construction sector close mid of December. So it seems as if it's more or less like a lost year in terms of any kind of activities going forward. We have to be looking at what's going to be happening maybe when the companies reopen and the activities start again after the festive seasons. That's what we must be looking at. But our concern at this stage is how best we can manage the pandemic from the government point of view, because as you can see what's happening in other countries in Europe, they are now back to strict lockdown measures. We don't want to go in that kind of situation. So at this point, let's manage the pandemic, and once we are able to manage the pandemic, let the industries operate at full capacity, and then you can really kickstart their activities at this stage.
Well, fortunately, it does seem like the country is able to manage the pandemic. You know, we've done a good job so far. Just lastly, speak to us about this construction boom that you mentioned. What can be done, whether by government or by the construction companies themselves, to actually activate or stimulate that boom?
It's a kind of effort that should come from both the private sector and government. I will give you a simple example to say, in the steel sector, for instance, or in the metal industry, what should be required is to say, can we improve on the issues of technology to ensure that we are able still to continue even during the pandemic? We need to modernize our industries to ensure that we are able to respond to future issues in the case that we've got maybe another pandemics. Production should not stop just because we've got a pandemic. So we must modernize our production processes to ensure that we are able even to have production where there is no humans involved. That's a way to go forward in terms of the fourth industrial revolution. And I think South Africa is capable to handle the process in that manner. Government's point of view, I think they have to put in strong, strict conditions in terms of the service level agreements that they have with the suppliers of particular products to ensure that whatever needs to be supplied is supplied, and the project should not be hindered by the issue of lack of supply from the supplier's point of view. So if the project is supposed to be completed within 2 years, then that project must stick to those kind of levels. So anything that needs to be supplied, it has to be an effort at operational level in terms of the industries which are involved to ensure there is supply of material.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Mr. Chifi Mhango, who is a chief economist at the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa.